Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cropper here. There's a beta male that goes by the name Endeavor, on the YouTube handle Endeavor. How shall I? Let me get situated here and get you a good view of the computer. For this video about the Enlightenment. Lies of the Enlightenment, he says. And this is video number 1. Now, I am heartened to know that it was published June 28th, which is fairly recently, so we get in early. So let us begin. Mr. Endeavor, beta male, let us see through your tissue of nonsense.
The Enlightenment, the intellectual movement of the 17th and 18th centuries, which formed the philosophical basis for liberalism, the political system which has remained dominant in the West for the past 3 centuries. The ideas adopted from the Enlightenment, such as liberty, reason, democracy, and secularism, to this day largely form the basis of what the West considers to be good and just.
Liberty, reason, democracy, and secularism. Just better make a note of those. Liberty, reason, democracy, and secularism, right? Now, if those are the values of the Enlightenment, then let's see how he takes exception to... Let's see what he's taking exception to here. Now, I've watched the video all the way through twice, so this is no surprise to me.
Liberal today might make the claim that the values of the Enlightenment have endured the test of time. After all, the West is as wealthy, advanced, and safe as it has ever been. But for someone who looks behind all the economic prosperity and...
Steven Pinker, who he just puts up there, is very good. Quite good. He's an altruist and he's confused. But if you read his stuff, you'll learn something. Especially if you're an objectivist, you won't get confused any further about anything, certainly.
Logical development to see a deeper societal sickness that threatens the West. One must consider the metaphysical basis of the society in which these problems developed. Because the conception of the individual, the state, and society handed down from the Enlightenment are largely used to legitimize...
I just want to go back and make sure I didn't miss something right there. Let's just make sure we didn't miss
today
anything.
Might make the claim that the values of the Enlightenment have endured the test of time. After all, the West is as wealthy, advanced, and safe as it has ever been. But for someone who looks behind all the economic prosperity and technological development to see a deeper societal sickness that threatens the West.
Alright, so there's a deep societal sickness that threatens the West. Now, I propose that we are moving away from the Enlightenment. I propose that there were different characters in the Enlightenment, and some of them became popular in the Enlightenment, made fun of others. Okay? Now, the ones that it made fun of have now become the new fanboys. Okay? And the ones that were on top are now on bottom. Okay? The doggy pile has switched. Okay? That's the problem. That's our societal sickness. Now, is he saying that our society's sickness is due to the Enlightenment? Something the Enlightenment gave us? Is that his idea? Because in actuality, our sickness is that we're moving away from the Enlightenment values. The more we live in and the longer we live in the Enlightenment values, the better the world will get. And as soon as we start moving away from them, we will go back to the age of monsters. There's a great line, I know it's from C.P. Snow, but I don't know where else he got it from. I'm sure he got it from somewhere. It's probably Edward Gibbon or something. But here's the line. The sleep of reason brings forth monsters, and the Enlightenment championed reason. And if we shut reason down, monsters will come back out. It's just as simple as that. So, what is he saying? He's saying that we do have a civilizational sickness today. Fine. Is it due to the Enlightenment itself?
One must consider the metaphysical basis of the society in which these problems developed. Because the conception of the individual, the state, and society handed down from the Enlightenment are largely used to legitimize the power structure under which the West is governed today. But
alright, now that's pretty heavy. The power structure governing us today is due to the metaphysical circumstances of those societies in the past. Now, who knows what he means by the word metaphysical, but he must mean some facsimile of the way that objectivists use the word metaphysical, just because of the context in which he's using it. a rough facsimile and not appropriate, perhaps, but we can at least fuzz in there that these societies, metaphysical, he probably means the philosophy that they used to face their problems, right? That's probably what he means by metaphysical. Now, metaphysics for objectivists is a very short subject, and to say their metaphysical situation is a strange statement. So we can let him off the hook a little bit and just fuzz that. Okay, so he's saying the philosophy they use to face tough situations has led to the entrenched power structures in the world today. All right, let's just make sure we understand him.
Societal narrative, which I believe we are. Questions will need to be answered.
Now then he's got something about, so here's the power structures, and then he says that our societal narrative is breaking down. Now, so far he's made various claims. That's a pretty strong claim he's about to make. The societal narrative is breaking down. I think it is. I think it's breaking down because we're letting go of reason, and we're taking hold of anything, even crystals. They worship crystals, and they collect crystals, and they buy and sell crystals. So anything that'll substitute in place of reason is now being brought out. That's what I think's happening. Let's see what he's got to say.
Power structure under which the West is governed today. But if we are seeing a breakdown of our societal narrative, which I believe we are, questions will need to be answered. I've spent the last few months reading texts from famous Enlightenment thinkers and their defenders. I've spent some time reflecting upon these ideas and how they hold up today. And
so, our society's breaking down. Go read the Enlightenment philosophers and what? Find the flaws in them? Is that the idea?
Of the belief that the worldview advanced by the Enlightenment is incapable of answering the questions that will arise in our modern era.
Alright, so the Enlightenment is not sufficient to lead us now. The Enlightenment didn't offer answers. The Enlightenment freed us so that we can offer our own answers. The Enlightenment gave us reason. The Enlightenment said stop with the racism, stop with looking at the color of people's skin, stop with the religion and God nonsense, and let's have science, and let's have individual rights. That's the Enlightenment. What does he want? The Enlightenment hasn't given us a false narrative that's leading us astray. We're being led astray away from the Enlightenment. And he's a racist clown who wants what? An ethno-state? You want to go back to pre-Enlightenment values and that's going to fix things? You're going to live like you did before the Enlightenment. You're going to live the way you did before the Enlightenment if you let go of the Enlightenment values.
I believe a real critique of the Enlightenment is needed, because I am convinced the Enlightenment...
There's no critique of reason. That's what the Enlightenment brought us. There can be no critique of reason. What would you use to critique it? Now, you can critique the people in the Enlightenment. Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. Fine. Go ahead, critique away. You're pretty stupid. A lot of people own slaves. Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence, which is a tremendous virtue. What are you going to critique about the greatest freeing of human beings in history? What is your critique of it?
Is incapable of leading the West forward.
It's incapable of leading the West forward. It gives us nothing to lead. We have to use reason. It gives us nothing. It says everybody's free to think for themselves. That's all the Enlightenment gives us. It gives us reason and individualism. We have to decide what to do. The Enlightenment said we're going to create an amazing new world, and it did. Science and technology came. I apologize, it's July, there's fireworks. Can you hear me over the fireworks? It's terribly noisy.
This will be the first in another series of ongoing videos I'll be releasing on this channel titled Lies of the Enlightenment. Each video will focus on one idea from the Enlightenment and the various authors that advance this idea. I will attempt to hold these ideas up to scrutiny and act.
You will attempt to do so, won't you? I look forward to these videos, and I will be there for them, Endeavor, you son of a bitch.
Do they ring true about the nature of man, or are they false and preventing us from understanding the societal illness that afflicts the West today?
So if we didn't have the Enlightenment thinkers he's going to pick on, then we would be better equipped to deal with the sickness afflicting our society. Now, the sickness afflicting our society is that we're letting go of the Enlightenment. So this individual is severely confused. Let's let him make his case.
This first video will strike head-on at the biggest lie of the Enlightenment. Enlightenment itself. The idea that through reason and intellect, man can morally evolve as a creature. That there was this...
You're on really, really shaky grounds when you attack reason, because you don't have any tools to attack it with. Really shaky grounds. And the sleep of reason brings forth monsters. This person here is the friend of nobody. Nobody. This guy is an ethno-fascist, and he is a terrible, terrible person. Terrible person.
Point in the 18th century where something just clicked in the heads of men like Voltaire or Rousseau, as if they were struck by an epiphany.
Voltaire and Rousseau were struck by an epiphany. Now, at this instant, we see the depth of his understanding. 2 minutes and 26 into his video, we see the depth of his understanding of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was bringing Aristotle back, was bringing Aristotle forward. Because Descartes had said, Plato, yada, yada, yada. But Aristotle was the whole thing from the Renaissance, the Enlightenment. Aristotle. It's all about Aristotle. Now, to say that Voltaire had an epiphany of some kind, and that we're following Voltaire's epiphany, is to have no appreciation for the Golden Age of Greece or for Aristotle's works, which is the situation he finds himself in here. Now, if you appreciate Aristotle's works, you know why Islam had a golden age. You know why Europe slept through the Dark Ages, because they were obsessed with Plato's philosophy. And you know why Europe woke up, because Avicenna, Averroes, Albertus Magnus, to Aquinas. Rewind and write those names down and go study it. That's how Europe woke up, because of Aristotle. Voltaire was standing on Aristotle. Everybody's standing on Aristotle's shoulders. Everybody. They called him during the Enlightenment. They called him the philosopher, as if there were no others, as if he was the philosopher. Everybody else was by name. He was the philosopher. Aristotle is the Renaissance. Aristotle is on whose shoulders we stand today, unless we're in some third world shithole. And he knows nothing about this, knows nothing about this. He thinks Voltaire had an epiphany.
Spectacular ghost of liberalism, and they figured out how we can fundamentally improve the nature of man.
Yeah, they had an epiphany, and they figured out how we can fundamentally improve the nature of man. No, this is old stuff that comes from Aristotle. They brought Aristotle back. They worshipped Aristotle. They worshipped him so much that they actually had to have Galileo climb up to the top of the Tower of Pisa and drop a couple of balls to prove... And I don't think he actually did that. I think that's not true. But at any rate, Galileo did prove Aristotle wrong about heavy objects falling faster than light objects. And they burned Tycho Brahe at the stake for saying that Aristotle's teachings about the heavens were wrong. They worshipped Aristotle. Okay? If you questioned Aristotle's teachings, you were burned at the stake. They worshipped Aristotle. That is the Renaissance. Okay? Now, once they had been doing that for a couple of hundred years, the Enlightenment just burst onto the scenes and gave us the United States of America and everything that followed thereafter. All the wonderful, beautiful stuff. He thinks that it's an epiphany on shallow grounds, on shaky grounds. He thinks Voltaire had an epiphany and we can dismiss it as easily as that. The whole history of Aristotle's influence on Western civilization pivots on the Renaissance, and he thinks he can dismiss it like that. He dismisses Voltaire and the entire history of Aristotle's thought like that. This might be evidence that we are moving into a new dark age. This might be evidence that we currently are post-Renaissance, post-Enlightenment. If this passes for thinking, for any percentage of the population, it occurs to me that our great-great-grandpas took things for granted that people can't even grasp anymore. This guy couldn't even grasp something like when there was that assembly of people in France listening to a minister, and the minister said, "What can we do to assist you businessmen and you farmers and you merchants? What can we do to help you?" And somebody from the crowd yelled, "Just leave us alone." And that's, in French, that's laissez-faire. Let us fare on our own. And that became a catchphrase for our great-great-great-grandparents. Just leave us alone. It's called laissez-faire capitalism. The most hated and derided system on the planet today, laissez-faire capitalism. Who defends it now? Nobody defends laissez-faire capitalism. Everybody says, well, you gotta, mitigate monopolies, right? Everybody says you gotta regulate the banks. Everybody's got their heads up their butts nowadays. But our great-great-grandparents said, get the government out of it and leave us alone, right? And they actually built societies on that basis. And it built our modern world. So we're moving away from that, and we are coasting downhill, more to the point. And this guy thinks he can dismiss all of it, and he thinks he's going to start on a firm basis now. He's got a much firmer basis than Voltaire's little epiphany.
This is the ultimate falsehood of the Enlightenment. The idea that Western man ever became enlightened, or that he ever could. That today we
The Enlightenment wasn't becoming enlightened. It was embracing reason. It was that as simple as that. And to not understand that about the Enlightenment, that it was just reason. It was just the birth of reason. To not understand that, to think that it's something else, whatever he thinks it is, then he doesn't understand what it's for, where it came from, where it's going.
Advanced beyond our nature to achieve a higher ethical state. The entire narrative of the Enlightenment is that it led Europe past the so-called Dark Ages, and since then we've continued to make progress towards more freedom, more equality, more enlightenment. Progressivism is an ideology based on this very principle, progress. And the conception of modern Western society that it gives us is that we're advanced past our ancestors, and that we can overcome the various ills which have caused conflict in the past through reason and education.
I just want to mention a couple things. This idea of progressivism and stuff. In ancient Greece, you could fall into slavery for economic reasons. In ancient Rome, they did have black people who served in the government, and even as like in the Senate. Was there a black emperor? Do I remember that wrong? So they did not view the color of your skin as any indication of the type of person you were. The ancient Greeks and Romans did not. For them, slavery was an economic fact. And they did not view slaves who had purchased their way out of slavery with derision. You could buy your way out of slavery and become part of polite society again. Plato himself was bought out of slavery because he was captured during a raid and had to be bought out of slavery. Now, this idea that the Enlightenment stopped racism, and that the Enlightenment is wrong about this, and that we're going to have to go back to racism. Racism is a very stupid way of viewing the world. It's looking at the perceptual fact of the color of somebody's skin. It's not even using a theory or an idea or an abstraction inside your head. It's just the very basic perceptual fact of their skin color. So it's a really stupid way to view the world. The Japanese or Chinese are an average of 105 or 110 or 115 IQ points, and other people are an average of 85, and Europeans are an average of 100, and what are we going to do about that? You can't judge it on the color of skin, or else then the Japanese, and they're going to rule the world then. Maybe they think they do, maybe they think they should. So, racism has not been a part of some great societies in the past. And to think that that is just from the Enlightenment, and that we can dispense with the Enlightenment and go back to racism, is pretty scary. That's what he's saying here. So he is not in favor of ancient Greek culture, is he? He has no idea what that is. He has no idea what that is. He doesn't even, he probably, when he started learning stuff, he probably had no idea what dates World War I and II were. And he probably still doesn't. I mean, if his view of Voltaire is as simple as that.
This is foolish, naive, and dangerous.
Foolish, naive, and dangerous. He's using these terms against the Enlightenment thinkers. Foolish, naive, and dangerous. Against what they did and what they gave us. Foolish, naive, and dangerous.
People might say, look at the Dark Ages.
Now let's go back over his thing. Liberty, reason, democracy, secularism are foolish, naive, and dangerous. Liberty, reason, democracy, secularism. Now, democracy, I'll agree. Democracy, I should have taken exception to that earlier, shouldn't I? Damn it, I should have, shouldn't I? Because they didn't like democracy in the Enlightenment. They did not like democracy. They set up whole infrastructures in their governments to get around democracy, to do some sort of facsimile of democracy. Because they knew the greatness of ancient Greece. They knew that democracy unleashed the greatness of individuals. They knew that. But they also knew that democracy killed Socrates, and that democracy did terrible, terrible things. The majority vote. They knew the majority vote is a terrible thing. So they set up a whole scaffolding infrastructure, didn't they? You know, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment, the Third Amendment, the Fourth Amendment, should I go on? There's a huge scaffolding infrastructure to protect us when we vote. People can go down to the voting booth and vote. And they can put people into power. But those people are just hogtied by the Constitution. They can't really do much. They can't restrict your freedom to speak. They can't restrict your freedom to own a gun. They can't just come and search you for no reason. You know, so that's what the Enlightenment gave us, not democracy. Democracy, which he says is one of the Enlightenment. No, they fought against it. They put it in chains. Democracy. They call it a constitutional republic. What they gave us, and they asked Benjamin Franklin, "What have you wrought?" And he said, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." Foreboding words. And with idiots like this around, I mean, if everybody's as dumb as this guy, we're doomed. We're doomed.
Pillaging and murdering each other back then, we aren't doing that anymore. Isn't that evidence that we're more advanced? It's true that we are less violent today than we were in the past, but that's because we're more advanced technologically, not ethically. Now,
the Steven Pinker violence thing is not based on essentials. It's not based on principles. It's statistics, and could reverse, and then we'd have to explain the reverse. It did reverse during World War I and World War II, and whoop. Now, if you look at those on the graph, it's a pretty small blip. World War I and World War II are pretty small blips, but they were blips. They were blips. And we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. If it reverses again, that would be an enormous number of deaths. And I think that's possible. I think that we wouldn't need like some sort of stupid huge nuclear war. I think we could get a lot of people killed really easily just by, let's see, what would it be? Venezuela. Like if a lot of countries did the Venezuela thing for 10 years or something, we could probably end up with famines. Probably enough famines to kill off, 100 million people or something. The thing is, there are 10 times as many people on Earth today as there were during World War II. So, any given catastrophe could have, theoretically, 10 times as many deaths, right? Starvation or famine or plague or something. So we're just we're set up and ready for a very, very massive problem. So we'll see. People could have said this 10 and 20 and 30 and 40 years ago, and then they could have died of old age yesterday, and so they outlived it, and we never did see the enormous catastrophe. So who knows? Maybe we won't.
Creatures of nature, just like every other life form in existence. And their first and foremost purpose in life is to survive and to pass their genes on to a next generation. How difficult survival is will determine what measures must be taken in order to ensure that. In fact, I'd argue the purpose of civilization to begin with was to make survival easier. It was a lot easier for genes onto that we are less violent today than we were in the past.
Okay.
But that's because we're more advanced technologically, not ethically.
Oh.
Humans are creatures of nature.
So we haven't ethically advanced, he says. We haven't ethically advanced. There's been no ethical advance during or since the Enlightenment. I don't know about that. Like, we fought the Civil War, right? We gave women the vote, right? Like, are those bad? Are those not ethical advances? Like, maybe those are just sort of iffy advances or something? Like, I don't know. What does it mean we haven't ethically advanced? So we have ethically stood still? We are where we were before the Enlightenment? No ethical change? Or we've gone downhill ethically? What does he mean? I'm going to rewind a little bit. What did he say?
Progressivism is an ideology based on this very principle, progress. And the conception of modern Western society that it gives us is that we're advanced past our ancestors, and that we can overcome the various ills which have caused conflict in the past through reason and education. This is foolish, naive, and dangerous.
Okay, all right. So progress is foolish, naive, and dangerous. So progress is going to be getting rid of slavery and freeing women to vote, right? That's dangerous. It's foolish. It's naive.
Say, look at the Dark Ages. They were pillaging and murdering each other back then. We aren't doing that anymore. Isn't that evidence that we're more advanced? It's true that we are less violent today than we were in the past, but that's because we're more advanced technologically, not ethically.
So the reduction in violence is because of technological advances, not ethical advances? I don't buy that, because I don't buy that. The technology should make it so that we are more violent and can be more violent, which it did in World War II. It was unleashed in World War II and World War I. It was unleashed in World War I in the meat grinders and the trenches. What does he mean? This is transparently backwards. This is like bizarre. I'm just going to rewind it and make sure. What?
In the past, through reason and education. This is foolish, naive, and dangerous. But a liberal might say, look at the Dark Ages. They were pillaging and murdering each other back then. We aren't doing that anymore. Isn't that evidence that we're more advanced? It's true that we are less violent today than we were in the past, but that's because we're more advanced technologically, not ethically. Humans are creatures of nature, just like
So he just waves it away with technology? He just waves it away with technology. He just says technology has advanced, therefore we are less violent. I didn't see the connection there. Destiny, endeavor. I did not see the connection there. If you could go over that for us, please, that would be beneficial.
Life form in existence. And their first and foremost purpose in life is to survive and to pass their genes on to a next generation. How difficult survival is will determine what measures must be taken in order to ensure that. In fact, I'd argue the purpose of civilization to begin with was to make survival easier. It was a lot easier to survive in a tribe than it was on your own, and it's much easier to survive in a settlement with industries than...
Is that the purpose of civilization, or is that just the nature of civilization? Right? It's just the nature of civilization. It's not its purpose. That's speaking in a teleological, sort of Aristotelian sense. What a confused individual.
...tribe wandering the land. In the Middle Ages, it was common for one kingdom to invade another, pillage its land, and kill its people. But the reason they did this was not because they hadn't read Voltaire, or because they had a monarch and not a democracy. It's because survival for them was much more difficult than it is today.
It might have been because they hadn't read Voltaire. It might have been. I don't know why he discounts that possibility so much. If they had been raised reading Voltaire and such, then maybe their desires would have been to write books and involve themselves in civilization, or read books, or become a lawyer, or something like that. I mean, instead of being a nomad. He says it's not because they hadn't read Voltaire. I have a scary thought for you, Endeavor. What if it is because they hadn't read Voltaire? Wouldn't that be scary? That would be a scary world to live in, wouldn't it? Because they hadn't read Voltaire, they were running around raping and pillaging each other. I propose that's the case. I'm sorry, but I have to propose that because they had not been exposed to reason and logic and etc., the Enlightenment ideas, because they had not been exposed to those, they were running around raping and pillaging as though they were pre-Enlightenment barbarians. Yes, I propose that. I don't know why you hand wave it away. It is the case. It is the fact that if they had read Voltaire, they would be better off.
Their kingdom was essential to survival. So if it meant going and destroying another competing kingdom, they would do it, or else it would be done to them.
This goes to the idea of thought memes, or whatever. Richard Dawkins did this about brain viruses, things that get into your brain and they spread to other brains and stuff like that. Well, you got to get them somewhere. You've got to get the brain viruses somewhere. They got to start somewhere. And if their source is Voltaire, if he's the one that invented, there's a thing called free will, and people can think, and there's something called individual effort, and people can create. And if somebody were to think really hard and create something that was beneficial and helped people live in reality and live better in reality, then the more we spread it, the better. So the more that people read Voltaire's ideas, the better. It's spreading a thought meme. It's spreading a thought virus. It's just spreading a program. It's just spreading the ability to deal with reality better. So it's not the case. It's not the case. It's not the case. This guy's terrible.
Now, that's not to glorify war, but to understand why it was necessary in the past. It's easy for us to look at the past and say they were barbarians. But in the modern world, we have no conception of how life actually was back then and what survival required.
Is war necessary? Sometimes, but war's not necessary if you look at this. Let's look from 1900 to the year 2000, right? Is war necessary? Well, World War I just started without the United States being involved. We got into it to stop it, okay? World War II started without the United States being involved. We got into it to stop it. We were sick and tired of wars, so we built a global military state in the late 1940s on up into the early 50s. We built a global military state to stop the possibility of a third war, which looked like it was about 20 years away. So then, from the 1950s to the 1990s, we just sat there with a bunch of nukes pointed at each other, and we fought a couple of little regional wars. Now, is war inevitable? If you have a certain type of system, it is, right? The United States doesn't go to war. People go insane, and the United States goes around. Rome had this problem, too. Rome almost never attacked on its borders. It was almost always asked to invade. There was always some group in the region right next to Rome's border that said, will you please send troops in here and help us do this or that or take power or whatever. Rome didn't actually expand in an aggressive way the vast majority of the time. And the United States has not aggressed, right? And so the world, if the United States were the big boy, the world could look pretty peaceful with very little war. So he says, is war necessary? With ethno-states and with the state running the economy, war is not just necessary, it's inevitable. So if you can do away with that and let the people run the economy, then wars are actually very expensive and hard to get going. The people don't want to afford a war. You know, the United States kept on not wanting to get into war. We kept on trying to avoid it. We didn't want to pay for a damn war. But in Germany, in Japan, in Russia, in Italy, they run the economy. The government runs the economy. So there's no question whether or not they can fight a war. Of course they can. They have all the money anyway. So his view of war is confused. What is he trying? Is he an ethno-racist? Is that his jig?
Thankfully today, we don't need to go off and kill each other for food. There are much more efficient survival strategies at our disposal. But to think that man has fundamentally changed is very dangerous. Very
funny that he just takes those for granted. I assume he does. He seems to. He doesn't see. it's just technology, right? Technology develops automatically, right? Today we have different methods for getting food. We don't have to worry about running around and attacking each other. It doesn't occur to him that if they hadn't been attacking each other in those wars, they would have fared better. Doesn't even occur to him. Doesn't occur to him that maybe those wars were an expense, and a needless expense. Maybe they shouldn't have been all fighting and warring with each other. Maybe they should have been minding their own business and trading peacefully. Doesn't even occur to him. No, war's necessary. Those wars in the past were necessary because, whatever, they needed food or whatever. The less war they fought, the more food there would be. Simple as that, because the people that are running around fighting could have been farming. And the food that they were eating could have been purchased by their efforts in society instead of taken from society because they were out running around and they had no productivity and no way to buy anything, so they just had to take food. You know, armies pillaged the countryside as they moved. Everybody knows that if you know anything about ancient history. They destroyed the countryside and farming. Potatoes were an important crop because they were underneath the soil. So soldiers could march through, battles could happen or whatever, and your soil is, protected your crop. So, I don't know. This guy doesn't know much about anything.
This first lie of the Enlightenment is cancerous for two major reasons. First of all, this narrative that we've become more enlightened over the past 3 centuries is a major contributor to Western guilt that we feel over our history. It suggests that...
No. The guilt trip baloney about the past of slavery and stuff is the anti-Enlightenment thinkers like you, Endeavor. It's that people who hate reason, they hate Voltaire, they hate logic, they hate Aristotle, they hate science, and they don't want it. They want to destroy it. They hate America, they hate freedom, and they want to destroy it. And they want us to all be African ethno-states of one kind or another. And you're helping bring us back to that, you stupid numbskull. Now this video's gotten quite long. My computer will get upset at some point. We're 5 minutes into this 11-minute stupid video. This is terrible stuff. This is terrible stuff. What are you trying to do? Oh, God. Ladies and gentlemen, please patronize me. Now, if you've made it all the way through to the end, you do need to be a patronizer of me. This is just the beginning. I've been doing this a couple of weeks. I'm trying to get my channel back up and get it started. If I can make some money, if I can get some money from this, I won't be doing my temporary job, my part-time job. I'll be doing this instead, and I'll be getting a microphone or something, and if I can make money at this, I might even travel and go debate people if that were to happen. So patronize me, support me, and stay tuned for installment number 2, Lies of the Enlightenment. What are we going to call this video? Defending the Enlightenment? Lies of the Enlightenment? Maybe that would be it. I don't know. We'll see. Thank you for tuning in, and if you made it all the way to the end, go join Patreon and give me $5 a month.